I'm going to talk today a little bit about my experience with NoCode. I've probably given talks about NoCode about a dozen times in the last few months, but it's always about like the NoCode landscape and like what you can do with it. I'm going to talk a bit more about what I built and like what I think you can do with it and things I would have done differently. So I guess this talk, oh, and sorry, I broke my glasses a few days ago, and I've also got like a little bit of an eye infection thing going on here, so I'm going to grip onto this for dear life so I can read the little notes that I've got here.
Are you going to make these slides available?
I will make these slides available, yes. For sure. Oh, you can take pictures, but I will also make them available for sure. Are you okay with that as well? Grand. So yeah, this talk is going to be kind of somewhere between a no-code talk, newbie entrepreneur stuff, and like product management as well. I'm a Bubble person, so I use Bubble to build the tools that I've built. Bubble is a no-code platform. I'm going to try and not focus too much on Bubble tonight, just because there's loads of different things you can build with. But I'm always happy to talk about Bubble if you want to. So yeah, really quick, mercifully brief bit about me. My day job is looking after the community in CodeBase. My job is to connect startups to talk to each other, to investors, to corporates who might buy stuff from them, just kind of get everyone talking to each other within the CodeBase community. I work closely with Max, Anais, and Sterling, a bunch of the team now, to make sure it's happening across everything we do. I'm really interested in communities more broadly, like how they function, like digital communities, offline communities, like what makes them tick. But I'm not going to talk too much about that today. I'm also a founder of a product called Sets, which is my no-code tool, which I'll give you the full journey of in a bit. But my priorities in life are like family up here. I nearly did CodeBase first there, God, sorry. Family up here, CodeBase here, and then Sets is like a third place here. So I build it in my spare time, like at the weekends, in the evenings. Like I'm not going to miss out on like family trips somewhere cool to, not work on it, but or to work on it, sorry. But I've been working on it for about a year now, in various iterations. Actually, I'll come back to the story in a bit. But yeah, I'm really sorry. I talk about no-code a lot these days. Like people are getting pretty sick of me chatting about it. I think they put on a bloody conference for God's sakes, But I do think it's really important, and it's something that we explore more of, that you can empower non-technical people, whatever that means, to build things that would traditionally require software. So, Sets. I heard about no-code about a year and a half ago, and I was like, that sounds cool. Sounds slightly unbelievable, to be honest, that you could build a fully fledged web app without writing a line of code. I was like, bollocks. But I thought I'll give it a shot, and I'll see if it does actually do anything. And came across a resource called NoCode.tech, which is a made in Scotland no-code community by a guy called Niall. And I thought I'll just try building something. At the time, we were exploring digital community platforms like Mighty Networks and Circle, and there's millions. I mean, Slack and Discord, actually. Discord's like the big one, right? And I didn't really like any of them. For various reasons, they just didn't really appeal for, we actually use Mighty Networks in CodeBase, but I don't like quite a lot of it. I thought maybe I could build something better. I still feel like I maybe did. But I wanted something mostly just to kind of hook my learning onto. I was like, right, I need a project to follow along to. I can't just do tutorial after tutorial. I need to actually build something. And yeah, I had this idea that I do like the aesthetic of Notion. I mean, how many people in the room use Notion or are familiar with it? Okay, it's a very simplistic, minimalist kind of data management tool. I don't know what you'd call it. People use it for blogs and skincare routines and wikis and things like that. But it's very minimalist. And I thought maybe if I built something quite simple that looked like Notion, people might use it. This is just me, by the way. Like I don't have a co-founder with this. Just building in my spare time, trying to sell it in my spare time, all that jazz. And yeah, I kind of started with a Notion page. This is what Notion looks like. And I thought, what if there was, this is this fictional co-working space that I've been kind of latched onto for the product. What if I built something that looked like that in Bubble? I followed this how-to guide that was like build your own Reddit clone in Bubble. It's basically build a forum tool. And I kind of played around with it a lot and sort of eventually managed to get it working to the point where it worked, and it looks like this. It is pretty similar, I think. I'll come back to how it's different in a bit. But I couldn't believe that it just worked. Like, you could log in, you could sign up, you could log in, you could create a profile for yourself, you could add events, you could get reminders about events, get events emailed to you, sent to your calendar, all of that kind of jazz. It just did what an app should do, and it didn't have a single line of code in it. And that was maybe about best part of a year ago. And I took that to a whole bunch of people I knew who ran communities, like 20 people who ran online communities, and I said, hey, what do you think of this? Do you want to pay me $30 a month? I can't remember what I charged, something ridiculously low, I would say, for it. And they all said, that's great, but hey, we just use Slack. And I was like, oh, shit. But then I thought, hang on, we use Slack as well, right? But it's not perfect. Like, there's problems with it. It's just a chat tool, really. You can do some integrations and things, but if you run communities, you want to have like events functionality, and Slack on the free version doesn't let you have like complicated profiles. You can have like your first name, last name, email and pronouns, I think, and that's it. So you can't have like a bit about yourself. You have to pay the $7 a month or whatever it is. And if you have a community like the CodeBase Slack, it's 1,500 people. We're not paying $7 a month for everyone in that, right? It's just too much money. So I thought, this is people saying we just use Slack to me. I thought, what if instead I built this as an add-on for Slack, where basically you have a Slack workspace. Slack, sorry, just to be totally, like, it's like Teams, or it's a chat tool basically. Just if you don't use it, just want to be as clear as possible with this stuff. You used your Slack authentication to log into this tool rather than an email. So you could only access a member portal if you would belong to a specific Slack workspace, which frankly isn't something like I've seen before. It's like it just doesn't exist out there. It's very niche. Like, there's not that many people who run Slack communities, but they do exist. Like, there are dozens of us. But I could see that there would potentially be a market for it. So I rebuilt Sets as a plugin for Slack. It basically uses the Slack authentication to log people in rather than you using an email and a password. I'll show you what that looks like in a bit as a sort of explaining of it. And that's where we're at with Sets. So this will be tiny for you, but this is Slack up here. This is Sets down here. It looks pretty familiar to how it is. Look at this little lilac color that I went for some reason. And the information from here gets sent to Slack. So, someone updates their profile, it does a little introduction for them, like that. I just updated my profile, here's some information about me. If there are events, it sends the events to Slack. It does a weekly roundup of events automatically, just stuff that community managers kind of hate having to remember to do. So automates all of that. And that's the story to date. I haven't made a single penny out of it. It is still very much pre-revenue. No one's paying me for it. And that will come. That will be part of this talk here. But that's the story of what I've built with NoCode, and this was entirely built with Bubble. So let's talk a little bit about what I would have actually done differently, because it's been a year now. I'm not going to pretend that I haven't made like a million mistakes with this, but I thought I'd kind of distill it down to 5. 5 lessons that I think will apply across. To be honest, they apply to building it with code as well, but this applies to across all different no-code platforms, like things I would have done a little bit differently. So, number 1, I'm not a designer. I talk about this all the time, that like no-code suddenly teaches you that you cannot design. Unless you've been trained in design or you've put in a whole lot of time to learn it, design's really hard, right? Like, it's actually, I don't want to sound surprised by that because I've always known it, but it's just a truth that you find out when you try to design something yourself. And let me get back to this. You can see how this is worse than this, right? And it's just like, I decided for some reason that I would kind of got so far with copying it, and then I was just like, right, you know what? I'm going to add some big sort of, I don't know what color you would call that, but these big buttons here with this sort of, it just looks uglier than the sort of neatness that you get with Notion. And I have no idea why I decided halfway through this to be like, you know what, I'm a designer. I don't need Notion with that sort of team of 50 designers to tell me what to do. And my dream for the next product, or maybe even for sets, is that I would love to have that sort of old thing of like a hipster, hacker, and a hustler. Like having a hipster, someone who knows design. I'm sorry to people, designers. I don't mean to call them hipsters, but it's a skill set that's just so valuable and it's just so important to have baked in from the start. And I would have just tried to find a co-founder who was a designer, or at least maybe hired someone early on. I mean, I don't have any money, but found someone who would come on board to work with me on this, because I think it's so important, and you only realize it when you just have built something for like 80 hours and you're like, it looks terrible. I was introduced to this site by a guy called Andrew who works in the building, which is mobbin.design. This is just a repository of like famous websites like ASOS and like, you kind of name it, it's on there. And it's a really easy way just to, like, if you're not a designer, just to kind of copy things a bit more. Again, I think that your ideal solution here is to work with a designer and make something that looks and feels and it is good. But if it's just yourself and you don't have any time or money, you I wish I just kind of copied more in the beginning. I would have built this more in public. Does anyone see the hashtag build in public on Twitter? I see 2 hands up. Okay, 4 hands up. Okay. Didn't see you put your hand up, Helen. I'm sure that. Okay. So this is just a cool little kind of community, I guess, on Twitter. I think maybe it came from the community Indie Hackers of basically learning how to do this stuff in public. Like when you build something, you're building a feature. It doesn't have to be about building, but talking to customers, like what your process is for like cold sales, like things like that. You can just do all of that stuff, and if you do it in public, people will just kind of get involved in your story from the get-go, and that's really, really powerful. This is a tweet by a guy called Xavier Coiffard. Sorry if you're watching, Xavier. But this is how I would totally have done this from the get-go. So put 50% of my time into building and 50% into marketing, rather than spending 100% or 95% of my time with building, because it's so easy to just get down that rabbit hole of being like, I'm building with Bubble and it's fun and I've built all these features, and then not actually have anyone engaging with you and sort of giving you that feedback. It also sells your product ultimately. People will be more engaged and potentially buy it. And I would say that the fringe benefits of this have just been huge for me personally. I was just saying, there's only a dozen people I know in Scotland who build stuff with NoCode. I mean, what NoCode is a very sort of broad church, but there's not many people doing it. And it's opened so many doors for me just talking about this stuff publicly and being like, I'm building this thing, oh God, help me. And it's connected me to sort of people I never knew I'd have spoken to. So even if sets is not the thing, down the line, it's definitely broadened my network, got me sort of, jobs and gigs and things that I just would never have got any other way. So yeah, heartily recommend that. I would totally have thought a bit more about what features are needed. Can I just ask, has anyone here built an MVP themselves? Built a sort of thing would you say that you had too many features on it, or not enough? Hands up if you had too many features in your MVP. Okay, thank you, Peter. Again, this is just sort of going down the rabbit hole of building. It's so easy to obsess when especially when you find a new toy like a no-code thing, and you're into Softer or Adalo or any of these tools. Just build and build and build. And I think I reached a point where I had a sort of minimum viable product that people actually wanted. But I just found myself copying other websites that had specific features just because they had them. Case in point, this whole thing, this is standard, right? This is what every sort of SaaS product has out there, gold, silver, bronze. You have to have a version of it that, suckers them in, and then kind of builds it up over time, and before you know it, they're paying you sort of loads of money every month. Why did I do this? I didn't have any customers. And this took about 30% of the time it took to build sets. To delve in on that, because So this is all linked to Stripe, so people could sign up automatically, like, pay me money automatically. I'd wake up in the morning and there'd be like 5 new customers, and I'd be like, oh, great, I'm an entrepreneur. But to get Stripe working, so Bubble speaks to Stripe, which is a payments processor. They speak to each other very happily, but all of the different fringe problems, edge cases that you can have with these things are just infinite. So trying to figure out what happens like logically behind the scenes when someone changes from, say, the ecosystem one to the community one, that was kind of fine. That probably took about a quarter of the time it took to build sets. The real problems are suddenly like, what happens if their credit card fails? Like, what happens if they, cancel their payment, at that end? These sort of different cases, you suddenly realize, like, oh God, there's so many ways this could go wrong and just the whole system would break. And I didn't even have any customers. So in the current version, this is actually from the pre-Slack edition, I basically built a version that's free for up to 15 people so they could try it out, and a version that costs X amount after that. I keep changing the price. I have no idea what I'm doing. But that meant there was just a very simple, like, either you're in or you're out. You're paying me this much money or you're not. I don't know why I thought, and maybe down the line I end up with like communities that have thousands of people in that, and I need to rethink, like, oh God, maybe I need to charge more money for those ones because of, database storage and things like that. But let's cross that river, when we cross that bridge when we come to it, because, like, get one customer first, dude. Like, come on. So yeah, thinking about what features are actually needed, just because you can build it with no code. Christ, don't waste your time like me. So this is a big one. This one's for Alex if she's watching from home, because she showed me how she did this with Bubble, and kind of made me realize that I'm once again just doing everything wrong. And I think this is kind of a both upside and downside of being a solo founder, just doing this myself. I built sets, and I kind of had the gist of what was going on behind the scenes, like what the workflows did, and like what this button here did, and things like that. I never documented any of it. Like, I just didn't need to because it was only me looking at it. And Alex showed me how she did it with her Bubble app, because she had co-founders, and it basically was this beautiful sort of design, kind of almost like customer journey type thing of like, here's what happens in these instances, using like Miro or something like that. I'll show you in a second. But I didn't have to share this with anyone, so I was just like, it's fine, I'll just do it myself. And then I come back to it after like a month of not looking at it. I just don't understand any of this. Like, I don't remember why I did this. So just for the worst example of this is how things log in. So this is like the login page for sets. Like, you sign in with Slack, it takes you to a Slack authentication page, and then it takes you to your community based on which Slack group you chose. That took like 3 months to make, like, as well, like, ridiculous. I have no idea how that, if anyone who uses sets is watching, like, I do know how it works, I promise, but I can't quite remember how it works. I'd need to spend a lot of time. Whereas if I'd built something really simple that just, this is using something called TLDR AW, like TLDR draw, but like TL draw, if that makes sense. It's a really simple version of Miro where you just don't even need to log in. You can just make flow diagrams like this. And within each of these stages, there's like something like this lives within this. There's like a very complicated thing is happening within each of these. I never did any of this. Oh God, I wish I did, because when I saw what Alex had done with hers, and I'm hoping she might come up to the next meetup and talk, and maybe this could be a topic, I could just see how everything worked with her product, which was, well, not everything, but yeah, so documentation, even if it's just you. Bubble and all of these tools have built-in documentation pieces that you can use. I don't really like them. It's kind of like a Google Doc comment thing, but just something like this in Miro or your favorite tool, a whiteboard, if you want, would be very, very useful. And yeah, this is a little bit cheesy, sorry, but honestly, like, I just can't believe like what I've built with this. Like, I show it to other people who build stuff with no code, and they're like, no, that's not built with no code, because they're building simpler apps with like software and things like that. Max, who runs 100 Days of No Code, I showed it to him, and he couldn't believe it was a no code thing. You can build proper apps and things with no-code now. It's amazing what you can do. And I was just so skeptical for so long. And it was only when I just did like one little tutorial, I was like, whoa, actually, this is pretty cool. So there's loads of these things out there. This is like on the Bubble page. There's a long list of like build your own Spotify with Bubble, or build your own Headspace with Bubble. You can just get started, and you're not going to have Headspace after a 2-hour tutorial for sure. But it makes you realize that you can just do this stuff. And yeah, these are the resources that I always recommend for people. So NoCode.tech is the Scotland-based no-code resource, which I think is one of the biggest ones in the world. Well done, Niall, if you're watching. MakerPad's really good as well. And 100 Days of No-Code, so that's Max Heining's thing, where you can kind of do it yourself, or you can join a cohort. He has another cohort starting on the 7th of February. It is a paid thing, but he has sent me a discount thing for it, which I can share with the group. It's like 250 quid off or something, if you want to do it. I'm not like getting referral stuff or kickback or anything from that. Like, I'm an honest broker here. Like, I just get props with Max, I guess. But I'll make sure I share the link to do that afterwards. And yeah, so that's 5 things I would have done differently with sets and what sets is. I hope that was interesting for the very first talk of this little shindig that we put together.